Hey now, true believers, today we're going to take a look at Doomtown Reloaded from AEG. Now, Doomtown Reloaded is a living card game, but AEG is not allowed to say that because I believe Fantasy Flight Games copyrighted the term living card game, but it's going to be the same thing. It's a game where you open it up and you have a certain amount of factions easily playable and decks that are pre-built, or you could build your own from the cards in the box and just play with everything you have here. But they are going to be releasing expansions that let you build your own deck in the fashion of a collectible card game. But at the same time, it's not booster packs like a collectible card game. You'll have a set amount of cards. But speaking of collectible card games, Doomtown was actually a CCG back in the day, back in the 90s. It was one of the weirdest ones, and I kind of vaguely remember it back in my days of playing a ton of different CCGs. I still think Rage was the best. But it kind of came and went. No one really paid attention to it. It was actually called Deadlands Doomtown or Doomtown Deadlands at that point because that game and this game, Reloaded, are based in the Deadlands universe, which is an RPG that I've never experienced myself, and I don't even know if it's been kept up to date to this point, but I'm sure you can find the older books at least somewhere out there. And the setting is essentially the Old West meets the occult. So it's got all the typical tropes of the Old West, and in fact, if you look at 90% of the cards, maybe 95% of the cards in this game, they all just look like your typical Western stuff, but then you get a few that are magic and summoning demons and things like that. So it definitely has that occult feel to it. So AEG decided to reboot the game. It had a cult following before, but has it held up over time? And what are the changes that they've made to this? Actually, I don't know, but is Doomtown Reloaded a good game in and of itself? Well, I've played it a few times. Let's go ahead and do a brief overview of how it's played. And I do mean brief because there's a lot going on in this game. But then we're going to come back and I'll let you know what I think. Alright, I'm going to give you a very brief overview of Doomtown Reloaded. This is a competitive card game for 2 to 4 players, although really it's intended to be played with 2. You just have the capability to play it with 3 or 4. And this is a sort of living card game. They're not allowed to say that, but what it means is that you start off with a base game that has a certain amount of cards in it for 4 different factions, and you can buy expansion decks that are going to let you add more cards into the game, but the expansion decks are non-collectible. They're just the same thing in every pack, which will let you build out the game even more, but the game is perfectly playable right out of the box. They have 2 starting decks, but then they have multiple other cards for you to build your own decks with in 4 different factions. The theme of the game takes place in the Deadlands RPG universe, and it's like the Old West, but with occultism and demons and spells and things like that. Although most of the cards look like your typical Wild West type cards. So you come with these player boards that they're not really necessary for the game, although it's cool that they have them because it's going to help you keep track of where cards should go. It gives you little cheat sheets on the side which will tell you how the poker hands work in this game, because a lot of this game involves poker hands. And the other thing you're going to do is you're going to choose one of your faction cards. Whether you use the pre-built decks or not, you're going to have, outfit is the proper term for these. So for instance, you have the Sloan Gang, and each of these cards has some different special abilities here. First off, the symbol up here indicates what the outfit is. So you're going to see this on all the cards throughout the game, depending on what outfit they belong to. Down in the bottom corner here, you're going to have the starting money. Money in this game is called Ghost Rock, and you have a ton of little tokens that represent that. So at the beginning of the game, you'll take that starting money, and then during the upkeep phase of every turn, every day is what the rounds are called, you're going to get this much Ghost Rock as sort of an upkeep cost. And they all have special abilities. So for instance, the Sloan Gang, noon and boot. This means you can use this during the as a noontime play. There's a lot of terminology in this game. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around, so just bear with me. And then boot means to, tap. Another term they're not allowed to use. But it means that the card's ability has been used until the next day. This one says that you can boot your dude in the town square if that dude, which is a character in the game, whether it's male or female, is still in the town square during the sundown phase. You either gain a Ghost Rock per other player, or your dude permanently gets a control point if they do not already have one. Well, that's as good a time as any is to talk about what the win condition is for this game. Your goal is to have control of as much property and and area in Doomtown, specifically the city is called Gomorrah, as possible. In fact, you need to have more control than your opponent has influence. There's two different important ratings in this game: influence and control. Your goal is to have as much control as possible and knock down your opponent's influence if it's going to keep you from winning. So that Sloan Gang card is going to help you out there. Other outfits, you have the Law Dogs over here. The Law Dogs start with 19 cash. As a noontime play, you can boot to choose a dude. Boot your dudes with a total influence greater than the chosen dude's influence to raise that dude's bounty by 1. Some players can gain bounties, which means that you put Ghost Rock on them in order to make them more tantalizing to take out and therefore get that money. Sometimes either special abilities like that will put bounties on them or increase them, but also trying to take control of an area that's not yours will put a bounty on your head. You have the Fourth Ring, who are like evil killer carnies, like the new season of American Horror Story, who use a lot of different spells and are abominations. And then you have the Morgan Cattle Company, who uses a lot of horses and gets a lot of Ghost Rock, stuff like that. So every single outfit is themed in a certain way. So you'll have your starting outfit, you'll set it up, you'll get your starting money, and then you're going to have your own deck, which you can either use one of the 2 pre-built decks that comes with the game, specifically for the Sloan Gang, or for the Law Dogs, or you can build your own at any point. Regardless, it's a 52 card deck, just like a normal 52 deck of cards. You won't shuffle it up. First thing you're going to do is going to use your money to put out some dudes. You can choose as many dudes as you can afford. Each of the dudes is going to have a cost down in the bottom corner, which is the cost you need to pay to bring them into play. This is also the same thing when you try to summon them, when you try to play them during the course of the game, you'll also pay that cost. But you can pay that cost now to bring out as many dudes as you want, knowing that you may not want to because you also have to pay an upkeep cost. So Stephen Wiles here is actually a good example. It's very cheap to put him into play, but he costs 6 Ghost Rock every single turn to keep him in play. Otherwise, he's gone. Other important stats here. First, and probably the most notable, is the actual deck of cards suit. The number and symbol. This is just like a normal deck of cards, and that's why together with the fact that you only have 52 cards in your deck. However, you can build your deck however you want and have as many different types of cards and numbers and suits as you want, but that raises the chance of having a cheating hand, which we'll get to in a moment. Bullets for characters represent their strength in shootouts. Now, the way that this works is that it's not just you compare these bullets to your opponent's bullets. That, depending on what color the bullet is, gives you a special ability during a shootout. Normally in a shootout, you're going to draw cards in order to get poker hands. If there's a silver bullet on one of your characters that's involved in the shootout in your posse, then they're considered a stud. And a stud gets to take that number and draw that many extra cards over and above 5. If it was a normal brass cartridge, let me find one to show you, like this, although ignore that question mark, then that just means a draw, which means and redraw. That means that whatever the number is here happens to be, after you draw your full hand together with whatever stud bonus you might have, you can draw and discard that many cards as well. Now, the red poker chip symbolizes influence. This is what's going to keep your opponent from winning the game, so more influence is better. If you have very low influence, it's possible your opponent can just get a relatively low amount of control and win the game. So having a high influence is better. That's another reason why Stephen Wiles is so good, because he has a 3 influence. So you'll put out as many cowboys as you're willing to pay for. I'm just going to put a bunch out as an example. Actually, you can't even see them off camera. But imagine that they're there. And then you're going to shuffle up the rest of your deck, and then the game is going to begin. Now, the game is played in a number of phases each day. Remember, each round of play is a day, and you're going to keep playing until sundown. If someone wins the game by having more control than the other player's influence during sundown, the game is going to be over. The first thing you do is gambling, which is just a way at the start of each day to determine who's going to go first and have the advantage during the course of the rest of the day. And this is very simply drawing. You'll draw your initial hand of 5 cards, but then you're going to put that aside and draw another 5 cards, and now it's poker time. You're going to look at the cards that you have, look at all of the different symbols. This happens to not be a cheating hand because every card is different. There's no there's not 2 10 of clubs. And then you're going to compare to what the different ranks of cards are and see what you have. So this one is actually fairly bad, I think, although I'm really terrible at poker hands, but regardless, you're going to, once for the low ball hand, what you do in the beginning, it's actually the lowest rank goes first. So once both players have drawn their 5 cards, there's not much they can do unless they have a character that can influence that. They'll put them out, compare the 2 hands. Let's just, for the sake of argument, and whoever has the lowest hand here is going to have advantage and is the winner for the rest of the day. So after you do that, you'll discard those cards. But if there was a cheating hand, which actually, still no cheating hand, it happens sometimes, which means you have 2 of the exact same card, then certain cheating abilities may kick off. If characters have cheating abilities, at that point they're resolved. It might let you draw extra cards. It might let you penalize the other players in some way, shape, or form. But after you determine who the winner is, then you're going to go into upkeep. That's where you get money from all of the different, your home locations or deeds that you might have, and also pay for all of the dudes that you have out. Then it's high noon when you're going to go back and forth, starting with the winner of the low ball hand, taking actions from your hand. So, for instance, let's say that I have, I don't know, we'll say I have 7 Ghost Rock left after all of my upkeep, and this is my starting hand. So, what do I want to do? I probably have enough dudes out, but I maybe want to put out a deed. So here's an example of a deed. This is control. So having control of this means that I have an extra control point and puts me closer to winning. It also costs 2 Ghost Rock, and it's going to give me a Ghost Rock every turn, so long as I have control of it. If I also have control of it, I get the special ability. I can raise or lower the bounty on a wanted dude by 1. Now this is private, which means that if someone else tries to take control of it, they're going to gain a bounty on their head. So let's say that I pay for this and put this deed out. Now, where cards are placed is important because dudes can only move around to adjacent locations without getting booted. If they can move to any location, but unless it's adjacent or the town square from their home, then they're going to get booted, which means they're tapped and they're kind of useless for the rest of the day. They might still be able to do things like take part in posses if other special abilities pull them in, but otherwise they're kind of stuck. So moving adjacent is very, very helpful. Some deeds can be placed out of town if it says out of town on them. And in that case, you always have to boot in order to get over there, but it might have a really cool ability. But that does mean it's also harder for your opponent to take control of it, so that also might be worth it for you as well. Now, you're just going to take 1 action and then pass to the next player, or you can pass whenever you want. And passing in this game doesn't mean that you're out of the round. It just means that you've passed temporarily. So once you've taken your action, your opponent gets to take an action. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that they decide to move that person into the town square. Then on a future turn, because they moved it adjacent to the town square, they can now move it adjacent to one of my deeds if they want and challenge me for control. Right then and there, unless they have a special ability, nothing in particular is going to happen. But at a certain point, after we've done our abilities, if there are dudes at a location on either side, that when we're trying to vie for control, someone can call out one of the dudes in the other posse, in which case you form up a posse of whatever characters you happen to have there at the time, use any special abilities to pull in any that you want, and then a shootout occurs. Now, let's see if we can do this just to make it a little more where you can see more of what's going on. So at this point, you're going to go back to playing poker, essentially. First, you're going to look at any special abilities that might happen in trying to pull in party members or posse members, and also if they're booted or not. You can use special abilities to kick people back to their home and boot them, which kicks them out of the posse, essentially. But if you've decided that you want to go ahead with the shootout at that point, someone calls out another person, you have to either refuse, and if you're unbooted, you can go back to your home, or you can accept, and then the shootout is going to begin. Or if you're booted, you have to accept no matter what. Some of how this works is a little bit tricky, so bear with me on that. But when you get to the point where you're ready to do the shootout, just like I said, it's just like the low ball hand at the beginning of the day. Although remember, like I said, if it's the breaking and entering, you may be in a private facility, in which case you're actually going to gain Ghost Rock as a bounty, or at least the main character is, I believe. When you're ready, you're going to look at the bullets of all the people that you have. So I have Stephen Wiles here, who is a stud. He's got a 3 for his bullets, which means, let me Bring that back in focus a bit. Which means I'm going to get to draw a total of 8 cards. I also have Barton Everest, who's also a stud. This would be like an awesome posse, by the way. Just my, which means I'm going to get to draw actually 10 cards. And Silas Ames here says that Silas' bullets are equal to his bounty. He doesn't have a bounty, so he has 0 bullets. So he's kind of useless, although if I had to take a casualty, he's fine to get rid of because he has 0 influence anyway. So regardless of how many cards you get to draw, you only get to keep 5 at the end before the shootout begins. But let's just take a look here. Just drew a bunch of random cards. 8, 9, 10. So I want to have a really good set here. But look, this is a cheating hand. This is a cheating hand because I have 2 4 of clubs, which is a bad thing. Although I could get me a really good rank, which means I'm going to be more likely to win the shootout if I'm willing to deal with any cheating abilities. However, the Law Dogs have a lot of abilities that give them bonuses for a cheating hand. So that is something to keep in mind. But having 3 of a kind could be really good. So that's kind of where although I could have 3 pairs. So you just have to kind of make the decision as to what you want to keep, what you want to go for. I guess I can't have 3 pairs actually because I can't keep 6 cards. But in any case, both players are finally going to settle on their hands. They'll reveal what they have. Whoever has the highest rank is going to be the winner of the shootout. And the difference in rank is how many casualties the other player has to take. You can discard one of your dudes to take 1 casualty, or you can ace them. Acing is out of the game completely in a pile called Boot Hill to have them count as 2 casualties. That's up to you because the shootout is going to continue until someone decides to go home. So you may want another shot to take out your opponents if it's worth it for you. So you might decide to just ace one of your people completely, probably Silas, in order to take those casualties and continue on with the shootout. It's going to end when either one posse is completely wiped out or one posse decides to go home. And now that whoever won is going to have control of that location. And then you actually just go back into normal gameplay. This basically interrupts the noon phase, and then you can keep going on. You can do things like shopping, playing cards from your hand, putting special guns, playing spells, all these different things until finally both players decide that they have passed, and then you're going to check for control. See who potentially wins the game during the cleanup phase at the end. I know that's a very hasty description of the game, but there really is a lot of different things going on. It's really so many different things that you can do during your turn. I just want to give you a broad overview of how the game is going to work and what you need to do in order to win. So with that in mind, let's take a look at a few of the other cards that come in the game just to give you some more flavor. So there are a couple of jokers that come in the box. The jokers are interesting because they're only used for pulls or draw hands. Draw hands are shootouts and gambling, but also pulls are whenever you have to make a skill check to determine if you can do something, you have to take the top card off of your deck. And in either of those cases, you can choose whatever the suit and value of the joker is, and then you ace it, you take it out of the game. Here's some more of the powerful Law Dogs. You have Sheriff Dave Montreal, which costs you 9 Ghost Rock, but he's a 3-bullet stud, 3 influence, and if there's a cheating hand revealed, your dudes cannot be casualties this round. It's insane. It's super powerful. Shong Windy Sheng, 2-bullet stud, 1 influence. During a shootout, you can boot her to send an opposing dude home booted. That is very powerful. Let's take a look at some of the Sloan gang. You have Sloan herself. You can barely tell that's a woman, but 4-bullet stud, which is insane. Sloan's bounty cannot be reduced below 1. Sloan and your other dudes at her location do not boot when forming or joining a posse, but she is 8 to buy and 3 upkeep, which is really, really powerful. Or really expensive, I should say. Jonah Essex is a huckster. Hucksters can cast spells. There's only hucksters in this box. Future expansions may have shamans who can cast miracles, but hucksters can cast hexes specifically, those specific types of spells. They have bullets and influence just like anyone else, and you can buy them and upkeep them. And he specifically gives other wanted dudes in Jonah's posse +1 bullet. Now, the way that the hexes work, well, you have a skill rating. What you're going to have to do is pull a card, and you're going to have to you'll add whatever the number is on that card to the huckster's skill rating and hope that it's enough to cast a spell. I'll show you a spell card in a little bit. The last one I'll show you for the Sloan gang is Barton Everest, who actually gets a benefit from a cheating hand. You get to raise your draw hand rank by 1 for this round. Then we'll take a look at the cattle company. What's it called again? The Morgan Cattle Company. Remy LaPointe, during the shootout, you can pay 1 to 4 Ghost Rock to get +1 bullet for each Ghost Rock you've spent to a maximum rating of 5. That's crazy talk. Lane Healy. Lane gets +2 bullets while he has a horse, which is one of the different shopping cards you can purchase for your posse. Then I'll show you Professor Eustace True. The same way that there are spells that you can equip, there are also gadgets. And people with the Mad Scientist keyword kind of do the same thing. They have to pull cards in order to successfully, let's say, cast those gadgets. For a noontime ability, he can discard a gadget from Eustace to move him to another location without booting him. All right, let's take a look at the 4th ring, which are like the crazy clowns, including Bobo. Bobo's not so stupid. No one's going to get that. Abomination keyword. Bobo gains a bullet bonus equal to the highest Huckster skill rating in play. You have Ivor Hawley, who's a Huckster 2, which means he's very powerful with spells. While he has a Hex, Ivor gets +1 bullets, influence, and the Huckster skill. It's really crazy. Now, Avi Klein has the Harrowed keyword. Harrowed characters can take extra casualties, so you can discard them to ignore 2 casualties or ace them to ignore 3 casualties, which is really good. The Ghostly Gun is really interesting because during the resolution, you can put the Ghostly Gun into your draw hand and he becomes the suit and value of your choice. Discard a card from your draw hand. So he becomes a card in your poker hand, which is just really, really crazy. Here's some of the shopping cards, the cards that you can just put in your deck and use whenever you need to during the noon phases. So choose a good stiff drink, choose a dude's ability that has been used. That ability can be used another time. Cheat Environment. Resolution, pay 5 Ghost Rock to lower a player's draw hand by 2 ranks. Cheat Resolution, whenever someone's been caught cheating, lower a player's draw hand by 2 ranks. Let's see. Spells. Let's go through some spells. Raising Hell during a shootout with a hex level of 8, which means you have to pull a card, add it to your skill, and hope it's at least 8. And Boot, you can ace a card from your play hand. 1 Abomination from your Boot Hill enters play. So this lets you resurrect an Abomination. That's crazy. Another one, Shadow Walk. You can move this Huckster to any location, or during a shootout, you can move this Huckster to join your posse, and you may make another shootout play. And we'll look at the Soul Blast. Hex X Boot. Choose a dude in this shootout. X is the dude's grits, which is their combined bullets and influence and value. If successful, send the dude home booted. If successful by 6 or more, you ace the dude instead. Let's see. We have guns like the Buffalo Rifle. If this dude is adjacent to the location of a shootout or a job's mark, they can join a posse without moving or booting, even if booted. We got to go with the Flamethrower. This is one of the gadgets. This dude is a stud. Shootout, pay 1 to 3 Ghost Rock. Raise the bullets on this gadget by 1 for each Ghost Rock spent. Each round's loser takes 1 extra casualty. Of course, because it's a Flamethrower. Different locations. We have our deeds. The Union Casino. There's a lot of text. You get it. The Killer Bunnies Casino, which I thought was very amusing. And last one we'll look at. The Mechanical Horse. Of course. Gadget difficulty 5. A repeat ability. Usually you can only use one of each ability on a card once, but the repeat ability, pay 2 Ghost Rock to move this dude. React to boot, prevent this dude from booting when they join a posse. So remember, you're kind of equipping these cards. That's just really a fast taste of Doomtown Reloaded. It is your typical living card game in a lot of ways, but there's a lot of unique things going on here too. I hope that came across. Now, let's get to my final thoughts. The comparison to Fantasy Flight Games' Big Daddy LCG, which is Android Netrunner, are inevitable. People are going to compare this game because this is AEG's attempt to sort of face off against that game. But it's not just because they're both LCGs, it's because, to me, there's some interesting elements that both games have that have to do with placement of cards, how cards move, and not just like throwing down cards in a random fashion and just playing them and putting them wherever. Where you put them matters. I mean, I know in games like Magic the Gathering it does to a certain degree, but really, who cares if you put your lands in front or your lands in back? I guess some people in tournaments do, but in this game it's very important, and hence the reason that they give you boards, which actually are pretty helpful. And although I question how much expense it added to the game, because it's, while helpful, it's unnecessary. But what I mean to say is that in Netrunner, whether you're playing if you're playing the corporation, I don't know why I had trouble saying that, you're putting your cards out in a certain way. You're putting your deck has to be in a certain spot. Your discard, because people are constantly going to, the runner is constantly going to be making a run against them. You always have your core card in front of you because that's where you hold your hand, because that symbolizes them making a run against your hand. Your hand has to be held in a certain way. Well, maybe it doesn't have to be that exact about it, but then when you're putting out pieces of ice and agendas that you're protecting, or cards face down that maybe the runner thinks are agendas, everything has to be put down in a certain way, and even the runner has to put out their array in a particular way, because they have to have their I'm forgetting some of the terminology here, and I'm going to get to that in a second too, but they have to have their programs in a certain spot, and then their tech and the things that they use to upgrade their rig. So what I'm getting at is that they're trying to make the game more thematic by actually having the placement of your cards matter. Doomtown is the same way. You have all the deeds that you have to lay out together with your home base, and then the dudes that you summon are going to go to your home base, but then they're going to be moving around to your other locations, your deeds, moving into the town square, then moving over to your opponent's deeds, and then you have out-of-town deeds. So all of this matters, and it does give the game a more thematic feel, because it's not just a matter of I summon this and this happens. It's you having to carefully work out how that person is going to move, where they're going to move to. It adds another layer of strategy up and above just the typical card gameplay, and also it adds more theme to it. So I enjoy that aspect of both games, and I think it works here too. As far as the theme goes, let me comment on the terminology, because I don't think this is as bad as Netrunner. In Netrunner, everything had a different name. Like as the core, your deck was your was it HQ or R&D? That's what it was. And then your discard pile was your I don't even remember. And then your hand was like your discard pile was your archive, and then your hand was your HQ. And I mean, all of these different things gave it a more thematic feel, but was also kind of annoying. Doomtown's mostly the same, maybe not as bad. I mean, all your creatures, your people are called dudes, and that's fine. But then being aced, it took me the very first time we played, we're like, what does ace mean? Why does this say this? What does this even mean? And then we figured out it's not just discard, it's going out of the game essentially to boot hill. Another terminology thing. So they might have been overreaching a bit with that. I wish they had kind of bucked that trend from Netrunner, but it does add a tiny smidge to the theme. And by the way, I don't really care about Western themes. Some people love them because some people think that there's not enough good Western games. I think there's probably too many Western games, because it's not a theme I'm totally into. And it's one of the reasons I held off on getting Doomtown Reloaded initially. But having said that, I love all the artwork. The artwork is really well done in this game. They really knocked it out of the park. I even like the way the boards look, as unnecessary as they are. And I like the Killer Clown cards for I'm blanking on the name of that faction now, but that all is really cool. They just did a really good job with the presentation, the graphic design, and everything with that. Now, the game is a bear to learn. This is another thing that it had in common with Netrunner. I made the foolish mistake of trying to play Netrunner for the first time with someone else who had never played it, and just sitting there and like, let's just plow through the rulebook like we do with every other game. No! Do not do that, and don't do that with Doomtown Reloaded either. What Doomtown has that Netrunner did not have is a really cool tutorial. It's not the most exciting thing ever, and it's not going to answer all of your questions, but playing with the tutorial decks that they have set up in the box and then going through their little help guide, tutorial guide, it is really helpful. It helps you get some of the basic concepts across, especially how shootouts work. Shootouts are going to be the one thing that everyone is going to trip up on when they play this game, because it's such a bizarre concept. Now, I had encountered something a little bit like this with the Star Wars LCG from Fantasy Flight, with the, I don't even remember, I hated that game, but I don't remember exactly what it's called, but like you're bidding force against each other, like you're playing cards and getting like in a force battle. I think maybe that's what it's called, is force battle. And I didn't like that at all. It works much better here because you're just trying to get poker hands, and you just draw your cards and reveal them. I mean, you have some influence over what you do. I mean, if you have studs, it lets you draw more cards, and you if you have other draw characters in your posse, you're going to be able to discard and redraw, but eventually you're going to be left with whatever you have, and you just reveal it and hope for the best, and hope that if you have a cheating hand, the other player can't do anything about that. But that whole aspect of how a shootout works and who can join the posse and who can't, and different special abilities being triggered and the cheating abilities, that's a lot to take in all at once, and the tutorial really helps you with that. But that's really what the whole game I don't want to use the word suffers from, but it is an issue in the fact that, like I said, this is a bear to learn because of all the different terminology. Even after a few plays, I don't think I've encountered every term and what everything means. During my overview, I had to look up a lot of things that I just didn't encounter personally because there is so much deck building and new cards that you can introduce, even in the base game, with special abilities that you never see. I mean, our very first full game of this, I had a character that had Huckster, but no spells. So I didn't even understand what that all was until our second game. So there's a lot to crack open in this box and experience, and learning all these different terms and getting it under your feet and how the phases go, and booting and unbooting, and what it means for control and influence, which is also something of a hard concept to grasp at first. This is all going to be very tough for you. Having said that, if you're willing to put in the time and learn this game and really get into it, you will really get into it. I was really surprised at the amount of fun I had with this. It is such a neat concept to have with the shootouts, and even just having the initial low ball poker hands. It sounds kind of dumb, but it adds so much depth to the game, because now when you go into deck building, which is really where this game shines, I think. I really haven't touched this much at all yet, and maybe you can take this as only a 3/4 review in that regard. Maybe I'll do another review eventually after I've gotten a chance to play with some decks and maybe even get some expansions. But the idea is that not only are you building a deck with all the common things you have to concern yourself with, how many characters do I have in here, how expensive are they going to be, how many locations do I have, all of this stuff, you now have to worry about what are the symbols on your cards. It's like you're trying to build the deck from two different directions and have them sync up, because you can have fantastic characters but have too many cards of one suit, which means you're constantly getting caught with cheating hands. But maybe you don't care about that, because maybe you're going to let your opponent use their cheating abilities against you all the time, because it means you may win more shootouts by having better hands of cards. Maybe that's an acceptable trade-off for you. And do you go for the dead man's hands? I don't recommend it. The ultimate hand, it's really hard to do. But that's such a cool thing that you have to worry about both of these. It can be overwhelming, especially if you're new and trying to get into the deck building of it. And I am a little bit fearful of how that's going to work. And my first couple decks are probably going to suck. But it's such a cool thing, having more depth to it and having to worry about more than just having the most powerful creature or the most easily summonable creature. You might be willing to make some trade-offs if it means you're going to do better at the shootouts, or you might be willing to give up winning many shootouts if your special abilities and your characters are ridiculously awesome. Any character that gives you an extra control point, or to just let you play some awesome magic cards, maybe it's worth it just to keep them back at home base, or just keep them in your town square. It's one of those things you have to concern yourself with in this game, but in a good way. So there's a lot here. Again, I don't know that I've scratched I've scratched the surface of it, but I haven't really dug into it. But I feel that it's really cool. Maybe I wish it had a different theme, or the occult was more present here, more of a fantasy sci-fi thing to it. But it still works, and I think there's a lot of fun to be had. I love the poker aspect of it. You do need those boards, though, especially when you're trying to remember all the poker hands. As someone who's never really played much poker at all in his life, it really helped me out a lot. I love the artwork. I love the presentation and the graphic design. I love the different character special abilities. The terminology is wacky, and it's really hard to learn. But if you can get over that, really, really cool game. I can't wait to see what else they come up with next. And honestly, I can't wait to see the next LCG that AEG comes up with. Maybe they have I know this is based off an existing game, but they really put it together pretty well, and I'm eager to see what they come up with next. My name is Nick. This has been Board Game Brawl, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day and in every way. Take care.